Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Gloria Emagwali, and I am delighted to be the host of this webinar. Our theme for today is Africa, the Way Forward. So let me introduce our speakers. And we have three panelists. I call them distinguished panelists. The first presenter would be Dr. Abdul Karim Bangura. Dr. Bangura has this unique situation of being a holder of 5 PhDs. I always wonder about this. PhD in linguistics from Georgetown University, a PhD in development economics from the University of Maryland, a PhD in mathematics from Columbus University, PhD in political science from Howard University, and Sir Capitol, a PhD in computer science from Columbus University. He has had several positions. He worked at Howard University, Bowie State University, American University. Well, I asked Dr. Bangura about his present engagements, and I was informed that he's the director and senior mentor of the Codistria College of Mentors. And incidentally, this is done to attract doctoral candidates. He's also a researcher in residence at the Center for Global Peace, American University, a visiting graduate professor at the University of Cape Verde, and an international director and advisor in Santo Domingo. Dr. Bangura has published about 100 books, 700 articles, etc. Now, let me just say that his topic for today would be e-clustering as the way forward for the Mano River Union States, West Africa. So we are going to ask Dr. Bangura to take it from here. Please.
Good greetings. I hope everybody is having a wonderful day or evening, wherever you are. My focus is on the fundamental argument for all African countries, even though my particular talk is going to be on the Mano River Union as a regional entity. I strongly believe that until Africa is completely united as one entity, we shall continue to be at the bottom of the food chain in all human endeavors as we confront this current globalization. But since that seems to be a very far away achievement, but the closest we came to it was when the great Muammar Gaddafi had put his own money, or what we say in the United States, put his money where his mouth is, to effect a union of the United States. But of course, that was torpedoed by Barack Obama and the French president at the time. I cannot even remember his name anymore because he has been out of the news. yeah, uh, back to square one. So meanwhile, what is the way forward? Well, my argument is that uh, the Mano River Union can be an example of how countries can come together and push their union forward to make things better for their people. Because at the end of the day, it's what we do for the people that really matters, not all these big edifices and all of these big monuments that really will count. It means that we should be able to to afford and provide at least the basic necessities for every human being that we allow that human being to develop. And that is food, shelter, employment, education, good health. So I employ what I refer to as e-clustering as one of the tools. There may be other tools out there, but I believe it could be the most effective tool in facilitating such a union, not just political rhetoric, but actual economic development put in place so that this region can develop. The people of this region can benefit from the great resources that they have. And so, of course, we know in 1973, Liberia and Sierra Leone decided to form the Mano River Union because they shared borders. And the Mano River, of course, runs from the Liberian border and goes all the way through Sierra Leone and end up in the Guinea estuary. And that river is a mainstay or an economic bonanza for the people who live along that river. And so it became a source that they realized can also lead to other developments in the region. And then, of course, in 2004, the great Guinea government at the time decided to join the union, and so that they can also benefit from the potentials of that region. And then subsequently in 2008, the visit of then Johnson Sirleaf, the first female president to be elected in any African country, made the overture to Cote d'Ivoire, looking at Cote d'Ivoire's own experience with development and its very good track record, invited Cote d'Ivoire to join the union since we are all four countries shared the same borders and the same commonalities. And they did. But over time, the goal of the Mano River Union, which was to foster economic cooperation among the neighboring countries, became a problem because they encountered so many difficulties, so many internal problems, and also not just intra-state problem, but also interstate problems among all four of them, as some countries supported the rebels of another country, and this one also wanted to pay back, support rebels from another country. So there was a great deal of chaos for over 15 years. And some of the pains of those foolish wars, as I call them, but they were not wars of ideology to say there's something African here that we are fighting for. But it turned out to be wars for greed, who wanted to take more money, more of the resources for his or her own benefits, became the modus operandi of all of these very stupid wars, I would call them. And so that created a lot of problems for the union to reach its objective, its goal. And of course, the rest is well documented history of all sort of barbaric acts that were projected on Western televisions to show how barbarian we Africans are, with all sort of craziness of people boasting of cannibalism. The rest, of course, is history now. But even within all of those struggles, there were some also positive things that were happening within the union. So we saw that intertrade between the countries really did grow. And we also saw that the Maropnet, the women organization, which was sick and tired of their sons dying in senseless wars, their husbands being gone for a long time, being recruited or forced to join various factions to fight. They decided that they are going to take a very active step, a very peaceful active step to try to curtail or at least diminish the sort of craziness that was going on. So my ROPNet, with uniting women from Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, we are able to create a last stand to say we have to find a way to end these crazy wars. And for better or worse, they succeeded in many avenues. They've succeeded in forcing groups to start talking with each other, in discouraging young men from being recruited senselessly, and also we're able to get resources to places where the wars had devastated. Here again, that's why I said in my book, African Peace Paradigms, if you really want to create lasting peace in Africa, get rid of all these men and let these women run this continent, you have a very different story altogether. Because we saw the same thing in Somalia, a place where a country where there were wars all over the place, but a particular place where the women said, no, we are going to shame you men, you're not going to bring war here, went on for many, many years without one person dying from any bullet. So we saw that as a success. We also see as a success that because these countries shared borders and ethnic groups were divided indiscriminately by the powers that be when they met in their meeting to divide the continent, to carve up the continent without regards for which ethnic group lived where. So for example, the Vais, you have them in Sierra Leone, you have them in Guinea, you have them in Liberia, all in the border. The Kizis, the story goes on. Because of those ethnic roots, those ethnic foundations, we found that they did better, those groups did better, and the region did well when it came down to making sure they protect themselves and protect each other. So you find out that if you wanted a beer that was brewed in Sierra Leone, you have to go to Liberia to buy it, because you cannot buy it in Sierra Leone because they were crazy, engaged in senseless war, but you can cross the border to Liberia and get that beer. So they will sell the beer wholesale in Liberia, and then you can go and buy it. We saw the same thing with the Yamandu market, whereas the Guineans, the Liberians, and Sierra Leoneans will come and sell their goods on Fridays. So people benefited from this very interesting ethnic dynamics, even though they were carved physically, but mentally and psychologically, the people never surrendered the reality that they were really one and the same. So we saw a lot of things going on. So what then is this e-clustering? E-clustering basically means that you are going to bundle up all the benefits, all the goodies, all the strengths of all of these regions into a cluster. And also this cluster then we allow for the countries to share information. It will allow the countries to share resources at a timely manner. It is an innovative approach for economic policy based on the concept known as cluster building. It can help to initiate the networking of all participants in a value-added chain. And if one country volunteers, and of course there are a lot of funding, international funding that can make that possible, to host this base, this computerized base. And now that technology has leapfrogged, even you have a cell phone, we are sitting here talking about our brother Victor to join us, and he was doing it by cell phone, but decided to convert to a computer. So even people in remote areas that are working in various communities can have an on-time information of what is going on. If e-clustering was in place, for example, when Ebola struck the region, I think many lives would have been saved, because critical information that was happening in one place could have been shared in the other areas. Experienced doctors or people in the health field who knew what to do could have shared that information with other people in a timely manner. I believe certain interventions or practices could have been put in place that would have avoided a whole lot of calamity. Unfortunately, such technology or such instruments were not in place, so people were just cross-bordering, did not know what was going on, and we lost thousands, if not millions, if not close to 1 million people that lost their lives when Ebola struck. And now we're talking about coronavirus COVID 2019. These countries have, of course, it's not homegrown. Most of the people who have been affected, and it's a very small number, we have to be honest about that. I don't want people to push coronavirus COVID 2019 as an African problem. It is not, because most of the cases that we know are travel related. And if e-clustering is in place, then certain interventions, certain techniques could have been in order where they can check in entry borders of all of these countries, so that way you don't come through Liberia and then you drive to Sierra Leone, drive to Guinea, and then this disease is spread. With those sort of mechanisms in place, I think the Mano River Union could do much better to limit or at least prevent some of these outbreaks. And what is the advantage? The advantage of e-clustering is that it will allow also e-commerce, e-administration, e-government, e-education to also be part and parcel of this whole exercise, because then we can have people in research and people in development, people in policy making, people in tourism. All of this will be on-time information that they can have of what is happening or what is transpiring in one region, and they can be better suited to put certain things in place to prevent many of these things that we see happening. So what are the clusters? I came up with 14 clusters, given the commonalities, given the interests of these Mano River states. The first, of course, is governance administrative cluster, because at the end of the day, everything begins with what the policy makers think is important anyway. Fortunately, we see that these countries have similar governmental structure. Cote d'Ivoire has, of course, a republic with an establishment of a multi-party presidential regime. Guinea has a republic type of government with 33 administrative divisions. Liberia has a republic, and its administrative divisions are comprised of 13 counties, just like similar to what we have in the United States. And then, of course, Sierra Leone has a constitutional democracy type of government. So these countries share similarities in terms of governmental structures that can allow them to e-cluster certain decisions within their governments to affect what is going on. And they take geographical cluster. These countries are blessed that all of them are on the Atlantic Ocean, or at least have access to waterways. So shipping things to this region becomes very easy from port to port to port. And this is a great economic bonanza for these regions. And higher education and research institutes. This is where there are disparities. Some countries have more, some less. For example, Cote d'Ivoire has very extensive institutes, research institutes, and many higher educational institutions, whereas Australia have few. Guinea almost very palpable, and Liberia is building because now they have internationalized their educational system to mimic the American educational system. So there are a lot of international organizations that beginning educational institutions in Liberia. But this is good because that allows them to network in terms of research, in terms of what an epidemic, for example, comes up. It's very easy if they are in a cluster. Information can be shared, and even students can be allowed to go study in those countries that offer certain program. They don't have, the government don't have to spend so much money sending them to far off places for things that can be learned within the Mano River cluster. So these are all benefits. And we look at customer population cluster. We know that Cote d'Ivoire has 27.5 million people. Guinea has 12.5 million people. Liberia, 5 million. Sierra Leone, almost 7 million people. So we're talking about 51 million, 51, let's say almost 52 million people in this region alone. That is what we call in economics a massive economic of scale. Imagine if they were united as one country, as one entity, one unit. Anybody wants to do business and hear that you have 52 million people that you can reach. The incentive for investing in that particular region becomes great because you don't need to send people all over the place to sell things or to convince anybody. Now you have one central place where you can do business or sell your goods. It also means that what we cut costs, tremendous costs in all these embassies we have. We have Sierra Leone, a small country with 4 point whatever million people. Have how many embassies all over the world? And what are these embassies really bringing to Sierra Leone? One begins to wonder why all the need. Why? Because they also want to be like the big kahuna countries to say, well, we have embassies here, 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 and there. But imagine if all of these countries were united in a cluster, it means they only need one embassy for all of those 4 countries that can serve the same purpose that all of their 4 embassies, for example, in Washington, would serve. You go there, you hardly see people even coming there. Maybe they come once a month to get a visa to go to one of these countries. So we also have the interest political pressure group cluster. These are very active in this region. And most of them, unfortunately, are ethnic based. So that's why we saw during the calamitous years of wars, certain ethnic were supporting rebel groups that were based on, that were organized around certain ethnicities. We saw that between Liberia and Guinea, and that's why many of these wars were protracted. They went on and on and on. So in a cluster, you begin to diminish the possibility of this factionalization. We have communication cluster. Fortunately, the radio still remains the #1 instrument of sharing information in Africa. The internet is beginning to pick up. If you look at where these countries were before the internet's explosion, it was pitiful. But with the cell phone and all of these new gadgets now that are in place, we see people communicating more from among those countries, and they pretty much can know in real time what is happening in some of those countries. We have security cluster. The security cluster, of course, is one of the most dangerous aspects that this region has to deal with, because you have countries that are allowing transshipments of illegal drugs so that some governments or some government officials can make money. And then these drugs, of course, end up in other countries within the region, and they have all kind of calamity, all kind of craziness that goes on as people fight to control the war turfs. We also have illicit and other criminal activity that take place across the borders, and people will come and do what, that's what happened, in fact, during the war in Sierra Leone, when you have Liberian mercenaries will come and bring their own problems in Sierra Leone and vice versa. And so that then a security cluster will allow real time and how the various entities can plan to curtail that. And we have transportation cluster. Transportation cluster Here we have a region that is accessible on the seaports, all of them being accessible on the seaport. They have decent international airports, but yet still, look at the amount of problems we have transporting goods from one place to another. Because of the rainy season, the roads are terrible. Even when they build nice roads with tar and all of those things, big rains come, wash up everything. So it means that what? These countries have to learn what type of soils, what type of environmental conditions they have, and they can share information on how they can construct roads that can have longer lifespan. But this does not happen because of everybody trying to do his or her own thing. And of course, internationalization cluster, all of these countries belong to hundreds of international organizations. That means every time there's a meeting, they have to spend thousands, if not millions of dollars to send representatives to these meetings to go say the same thing. This is our problem. This is what we want you to do for us. Why not? Why in a cluster? That means well, you don't have to have all of these people be sent all over the place to this meeting. It means that you can just send a representative or two for all 4 countries. That means savings in all of the expenditures that that go hand in hand in being member of this organization and attending all of these meetings. So that is a big saving. Refugee cluster. We see that Cote d'Ivoire still have 303,000 refugees, even though the war has stopped how many years ago. In Guinea, there are no more refugees because they used to have almost 1 million refugees from all of these countries that we are going there. But after the war, the Guineans told everybody to go home. And to this day, Liberia still have over 8,000 refugees, and Australia have almost 6,000 refugees. After so many years, that these wars have ended. Why are some of these people not going back? The answer is very simple. It's because they found that they are better off staying where they were as refugees than going back to places where they are going to start things all over again and have much more difficulties. So that means what? There have to be certain agreements with these countries if they are in a cluster as one entity to say, hey, look, they are minor people, they have the right to stay here, they cannot be harassed. If they can eke a living and they can make life comfortable for themselves and their people, then they should stay and not be forced to go out. I can go on and on and on, but because of time constraint, so that I think I'm close to my 20 minutes already. I think I'll stop here, and hopefully with questions asked, I'll be able to explain much more the science behind clustering, because it's not really new. Clustering just means that what? You bring certain things that have similarities into one, and then you synthesize them to have the best optimum answer or the best optimum solution of solving that problem. So I'll end here and just say my favorite mantra from the ancient Egyptian or I say Kemetian thinker, philosopher, Imhotep Ham, Hotep Huru. Whatever we do, we must always do in peace. I thank you, and I will shut up.
Well, thank you so much. You know, what came to my mind was multidisciplinarity, because you can't do all these clusters if you don't understand what is connected to, you know, and also master different fields so that you can bring them together. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very illuminating. I'm going to ask.
That is a great point of pluridisciplinarity, because that is African. The African, by its very nature, is multi or pluridisciplinary. We are not people who are one track on one vision oriented. If you go back from the ancients all the way to the great Chekanta Joe, he emphasized pluridisciplinary because you cannot understand all this complexity of the African thought without being able to look at it from completely different disciplines and then merge them into one to synthesize the essence of what that thought is.
Indeed, indeed. It's about the African diaspora. How do you see the diaspora fitting into the e-clustering model?
Well, the wonderful thing about the diaspora is that it has invested or has played its role at very critical times when the region was in crisis. For example, if it wasn't for the Sierra Leonean diaspora in the US, 99% and maybe 1% of those in Britain, Sierra Leone would have been a completely dead state. There came a time when they were getting no revenues because of the senseless war. It was Sierra Leoneans in the United States that were raising money, sending remittances to relatives, friends, and going around with collection plates from churches to different organizations, different agencies, governments to ask to help. And the resources were tremendous. Matter of fact, in Liberia, during their own crazy war, up to this moment, the remittances and the resources Liberians in America send to Liberia are greater than the country's own GDP. And so the diaspora has a lot of weight in terms of also influencing how things are done in those countries. The challenge becomes that they usually are not united in their voice and what they want or what to push. They also get into these factionalisms. Then it becomes a problem for them to really exact a much greater influence that they are capable of exacting. So in an e-cluster situation, the diaspora can provide a lot of things. One is their skills, their talents to help to institute and to help make these things run and function. The two is they have the financial resources to contribute towards making this cluster work. So it's really a blessing. As a matter of fact, it was us in the US that protested and asked Bill Clinton to force the warring parties to a negotiation table at Lomé that brought an end to the crazy war in Sierra Leone. If we did not do that here and allow Susan Rice to sell the Kakamimi idea of giving more lethal weapons to the government military in Sierra Leone, that war would have continued maybe up to this day. After 11 years, there was a stalemate. The government did not win. The rebels could not win. Why do you think sending more lethal weapons will work? Well, we know that government troops were selling some of their own weapons to the rebels so that they can have money to feed their wives and their families, because they were not even being paid. There were no salaries. So it made no sense for us to hear that sort of craziness. And so we challenged Susan Rice's, who was lobbied heavily, not to for Bill Clinton not to buy into that foolishness. And lo and behold, for better or for worse, we have a full-fledged democratic system in Sierra Leone back again, and things have been peaceful for many years now. So in so many ways, the diaspora was smart enough to not support a foolishness of continuing a war that we saw no end to. You know?
Well, there's one other thing that comes to mind. We have a lot of terrorist organizations, and they seem to be doing their own, amalgamation possibilities and so on. So my question to you is this: how would we avoid e-clustering to be taken by the bad guys? Remember, we have the ISIS-derived terrorist groups. If we look at on a regional basis, we have in the case of Mali, northern Mali, in the case of Burkina Faso, well, occasional inroads from these terrorists, and they seem to be working together. The Azawad folks, They are doing their own clustering, e-clustering. Then, of course, you do have in the Nigerian side, the Boko Harams, and now I think they have some splinter groups, and they seem to be sharing and exchanging notes with the Azawad people. Now, I must say that the Somali terrorists seem to be working on their own, but we don't know, if that could change. So my question to you is, well, what do we do about these different terrorist groups?
Well, the terrorist groups are going to go away overnight, and you cannot push them away. That is matter of fact making the case more why quote unquote the good guys should have their own e-clustering and put their own interests first. You just made a perfect case. And that was also in the situation when the Islamic quote unquote fundamentalists or extremists were very well organized. They communicated, they coordinated things, and they were able to carry on their agenda successfully, as evil as the agenda was. Here we have the overwhelming majority of Muslims who are peaceful people who want to live in peace, want to see development, they want to see their children have a good education, want to live better lives. We are not able to muster the same strength and coordination to stop this craziness that is going on. I think that will be the number one lesson, in fact, for this e-clustering of these regions, that, hey, there are always going to be detractors. There are always going to be people who are going to make trouble, but we have to be steadfast. We have to be serious about what we want to do and what we want to achieve for our people. And most of the time, we always like to look at the enemy without, but some of the enemies are really those within. And we can go on and on to look at many examples, but there's no need because it's well known, you see?
Okay. Well, I would want to get a plan from you for the financing, for the technical know-how. Are we going to involve the United Nations? Is it the African Union? What sort of institutional infrastructure do you see would work along with the e-clustering model?
Well, as an e-clustering model, of course, you need a base where the computer hardware, the technology will be, and it's really not an expensive endeavor, really, to be honest with you, because these things are now easily accessible, and we are blessed with satellites. We no longer have to put telephone cables to connect anything. Even I get messages on Facebook from people who live in very remote villages in Africa. They can communicate with me in real time, and we can exchange ideas and sometimes jokes, stories, and all of those things, pictures, you name it. So it is no longer the impossible challenge as we used to think about it. And I would say that any international development agency, especially SIDA, the Swedish Institute, International Development Agency, will be very happy to put that to fund such projects, because there are certain international agencies that like to see such innovative development. So there are resources out there. The Chinese are running all over Africa trying to grab more markets, try to have more presence. Use them. I mean, they're using Africa, they're using us, use them to finance some of these projects. Not just what they want to see done, and that is the problem I have with many of these African leaders that sign contracts with China. They say, well, they have cheaper interest rate, which is good. But you don't go sign a contract where you allow the Chinese to even bring in their laborers. In some places, even bring in prostitutes for their laborers, while you cannot insist on that contract to say, hey, we need our own people to be trained so that we at some point, these programs, these projects can be indigenized, can be Africanized, that we can have control over them. So if you let them do everything all the way to even the manual labor, that means you're still in their jaws. Anytime something goes wrong, you have to go back to them to come fix things, to come upgrade things, which makes no sense at all. So I don't know who is signing this contract or who is being paid on the side for them to sign this contract, but that foolishness really need to stop. To say, yes, we welcome all investors, all countries that want to do something in Africa for the betterment of Africa, in this case for the Mano River Union, but we also want to make sure that our people benefit, not only from what is being put in place, but also the knowledge that is being created to make sure that indigenization of these projects takes place, so that way when you are gone, contracts expire, that we are able to still function, we're still able to maintain these things that you're building for us.
But I want to make one comment, observation though. I would say that the Chinese in the first decade did a lot of the things you mentioned. They would bring all their workers and so on. But I think they met some good opposition to that. And I'll give you a quick example. Ethiopia. I recall around 2010, when I visited Ethiopia and I asked people, what do you think about the Chinese presence, this and that? They were very, I got some very lukewarm responses. And when I dug deeper, the major annoyance on the part of these people was the Chinese bringing of their own laborers. In other words, no opportunity for additional employment. And that was their major grounds. And, that correlates with what you said. However, by about 2014, 2015, when I asked the question again about China and the Chinese, I got a different response. Because by that time, the Chinese, whether I think the Ethiopian government, they read the writing on the wall, and they started to make sure that they employed Ethiopians. And as a matter of fact, in 2017, 2018, because I traveled to frequently there, I saw a lot of road projects, a lot of road building projects, but I only saw, you would see just one Chinese official. So anyway, what I'm saying is that they did that, you're quite right, but I think they were made to change in many regions. Of course, there may be others still existing. But yes, we take note of your very illuminating insights. And I think because of some of the difficulties in getting online, we will have to end the meeting with this at this juncture. I'm sorry that we were only able to hear a few minutes of Dr. Bekere. Dr. Udo has been getting some difficulties. And my own idea is that we've had a very good presentation and quite some interaction. And unless the technical problem is changed within a minute or two, I think we have a lot to walk away with. I'm not seeing Dr. Bekere again. So thank you very much, Dr. Bangura. We will take note of all the suggestions you made in terms of e-clustering, and we do hope that you take it a step ahead by informing, the powers that be, African Union people, for example, and others, policymakers, because that's another issue I wanted to bring up. How do we get this implemented? And although I've been bombarding you with questions, the implementation. Do you have any final thoughts on implementation?
Yes, so the point, in fact, you raised why China is changing its behavior and how they do contracts and deal with Africa, because many of us did raise a lot of questions and put the African governments on notice that they can no longer just accept such contracts at the marginalization of their people who they are really there to serve. And the reason why I even got involved and made my points in some of the Africa Union meetings that I was invited to attend was when the beautiful monument in Senegal, in Dakar, was being built. And I see all the folks who are working there were 100% Chinese from neighbors. I couldn't even see one Senegalese. That was really very disturbing.
Were they Korean or Chinese?
They were Chinese. They were Chinese.
Okay.
And so that was quite disturbing for me to see. And so it made me make some noise, and many people were also saying the same thing around the time. That's why I see some of those attitudes has changed. But even in Ethiopia, maybe in certain places, yes. But now that Alibaba, what's his name, Ma, as the richest man in China, has invested heavily in China, I begin to see certain Chinese strong influences. Matter of fact, at the airport, in one of the kiosks where the information kiosks, you see Chinese are pretty much running information and all of those things there. And I begin to wonder what happened to the Ethiopian that used to do that. And in one of the lines, I went to just get some information on where to go and catch my connecting flight. I found a Chinese young lady who whenever an African comes for information, she just gives them a paper and say, go over there like that. But when a Chinese man came, she was patiently sitting there and going through and explaining to her in detail what to do. And I noticed that while I was in the line. So when my turn came up, I said, what you are doing is not acceptable. Here you are in Addis Ababa airport, serving the majority of the people being Africans, Black folks. You take time to explain things to your Chinese relative, but with the Africa, you just whisk them away. I said, that is foolishness, that you cannot continue to do so. I got my information. She took the time to make sure she print what I needed and took care of things. What I'm saying is that sometimes we Africans also have to speak up whenever we see some of these disrespectful behaviors towards us. We just cannot accept it. I'm not saying go throw things around, throw a temper tantrum, but make sure that these people really know that you realize what it is that they are doing. And I think that is one of the best teachers, is to inform whoever is doing the malpractice, so that way they can be aware of what they are doing, and hopefully they can change their behavior. After me, I saw a change. I'm not saying it's because of what I said and what I did, but I saw a change in how she was treating African customers. So I'm saying that we cannot just be silent and be quiet about things that are not acceptable. I'm quite sure if we go to China, and I am at the kiosk, and treat a Chinese person in a Chinese airport like that, what would have behold on me? So if they expect me to treat them with respect, I think I also should demand that when they are in my own land, in my own territory, that they should treat me likewise with respect. That's all one asks for.
Well, yeah,
And about
yeah,
go ahead.
I definitely agree with you. And I mean, recently we saw some very unpalatable, events in China itself, COVID related, where Africans in China, were treated very badly. And I told myself, what about the Chinese in Africa? If we did the same, the whole thing would be pretty unpleasant. So you are quite right that we have to call out the Chinese where necessary. I think they have done a good job in Ethiopia by heeding the calls of people. I know Zambia was a trouble spot, and in fact, we had a lot of protests in the copper zones. I have to be honest, I don't know how much progress has been made in Zambia, but I know the Zambians were quite uncomfortable. And so at the end of the day, we probably have to look at the entire region. By the way, we got some negative news from Kenya with respect to the Chinese not too long ago. Workers being locked in. And I think there was even a case of corporal punishment on the part of one of the managers, Chinese managers, versus an employee. So that's also a very uncomfortable and unpleasant situation. So I think what we have to do is give them credit where they have made a good turn and recognize where they haven't. Well, and I guess that brings us to the end of our presentation. I want to thank you, Dr. Bangura, for your very eloquent and illuminating presentation. You really gave us a lot of food food for thought. And in fact, as I reflect on what you said, I'm thinking this is Pan-Africanism in a wider, pragmatic, and of course, also infrastructural and professional context. Because it's all well and good to talk about Pan-Africanism, but you've got to back it up. And backing it up with integrated knowledge, integrated practices. That's what I'm getting from your eloquent discussion. Integrated data sharing, and it's all connected to a positive Pan-Africanist approach, not just Pan-Africanism as a political slogan, which is also okay, but it's Pan-Africanism with palpable infrastructural developments as well. So thank you very much. And to all our participants, according to these webinars, we never see the participants, they see us. We'll continue and we'll probably bring Dr. Udo and Dr. Bekere next time, because the plan is to have a series of webinars. This is the first. Thank you very much. I hope you
Thank
wouldn't
you.
miss your meeting.
No, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I
Good.
said 12, I have a few more minutes.
Okay.
But just to chime in on Pan-Africanist uh, discourse that you raised in our brand new book on Africa and globalization, novel, a multidisciplinary perspective, I made the point that we are transitioning from old Pan-Africanism, which is the political instrument that allows us to see ourselves as one, to see our struggle as one, and give us the thinking and the ability to come up with ways that we can unite and move ahead and achieve our freedoms from colonialism, post-slavery or Jimmy Crowism, and all of those other isms that we are working against us. That the new Pan-Africanism now is how do we channel that past strength, that past experience, that past knowledge into new knowledges that can allow us to withstand the vagaries that are being put on us by this new globalization. That means Pan-Africanism have to be a practical economic instrument that can allow our people to develop, that can allow our people to resist exploitation, and to allow our people to transcend. And that's why I no longer talk about neocolonialism. There are still people who are stuck in the neocolonialism project. Now I talk about not decolonization, not globalization. As we got so many people running around writing books, articles about decolonization and deglobalization. I'm saying we need to transcend that and talk about de-neocolonialization as opposed to decolonization. Because in de-neocolonization, we are piggybacking on the great Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah's teachings that not only the enemies of our struggle or our path to development, just the colonialists or the masters, but also some of our own people are also part and parcel of the problem to this development and this growth for our folks. And we have to be honest about it, that some of our leaders have been very detrimental to the progress of Black folks. So their account also need to be included in the package of how not only to resist the global forces from outside, but those who are being used inside to create more problems, more difficulties for our people within. And that's why I don't talk, no, I go beyond now decolonization and talk about de-neocolonization, because the forces that we Africans have to struggle with are not just only the outside, but also the internal forces. And
Yeah,
when
that, I think
I
that's
make
a useful, a very useful concept. And I must add that to my list. But you know, while you were talking, we keep going towards the end. I was thinking about COVID, and I was thinking of how the president of Madagascar, in a way, you know, helped to push forward some of that Pan-Africanist sentiment. Now, you may recall that you have the Madagascar people coming up with a proposal for getting rid of COVID, for dealing with COVID. And as to how efficacious, that's another issue. I don't see Madagascans dying like flies. And that tells me that it has been successful. But I leave that to the analysts and the clinical, statisticians.
Well, that is the mistake we are making. We cannot leave the analysis of COVID to the so-called health experts. Yeah. For one thing, they are already those people because they have to deal with people who are infected by this on a daily basis. So they only are comfortable, or they are only familiar with the horrors, not the real big picture of
The
COVID. And
positive
this is
part
why
of it. Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm writing the book on
Yes.
coronaria, which is going to be a 24-chapter book, if not more than that, because we have also accepted other proposals, and we got a very good contract from one of the top presses in the world to publish the book. We have to
What's the
be very
proposed
honest.
title? The title? What's the title?
Uh, Hysteria, hysteria, that the overhyping of COVID has blinded some of the realities of this disease. Nobody is
Right.
denying that COVID-19 does not exist. Nobody is denying it. But the fact that the news media have hyped it, and certain politicians have hyped it to the level that people are even scared to come out of their houses. People are now
Right.
engaged in all kinds of disorderly behavior, raping
Well, you
young
know,
girls.
my whole, don't forget, I started this point by saying that the model that we saw with Madagascar was a positive one in the sense that they reached out and to other African regions, and other African regions also reach out to Madagascar, in addition to their own, because there are some other possibilities. I think Kenyan researchers came up with something. I believe Amadou Bello University, for example, has something on trial. You can't hear me? Oh, Senegal.
No, I think Senegal, yeah. The thing is that...
So my point, I was just talking about the fact that the integration, the interaction, interconnection, that was my point. I think we'll leave COVID itself for another day. But the interaction, the integration, and all that, that was my point, would fit into your e-clustering plan. You were saying you were about
the reason why I brought the general argument of e-COVID, you're talking about Madagascar. Why is it? Why were they resisting something that works? It's very simple, because their interest does not want to see the success story of a Senegal, that you can have a test for $1 that is very accurate to the 99.999%. They don't want to talk about the Senegal that has developed certain medications that have saved many people's lives. Why? Because they are interested that do not want such information to happen. That's why when I rank my top 10 leaders in Africa last month, it's incidentally, they happen to be the places where many of these things are being dealt with successfully, hinges on good leadership. Yeah. Number one, Gami. Number two, our brother in Ethiopia. And the list goes, the Madagascar is number 5. I can go down to the bottom 10 list. We have to be very honest, Professor Gloria Migwali. If you have, for example, in the United States, where you can diagnose somebody as having COVID 2019 and you treat them, and you get $19,000. And if you put them on a ventilator, you can get $39,000. Now you tell me why I should accept any figure that will be bandied around. Why would the hospital have 100% COVID cases in Florida only for an official to say, wait a minute, it's impossible for a hospital to have 100% for the official to go there and find out that there were only 9% cases, because it was into their greedy interest the numbers so that they can make money. We have to be honest about this thing. So African leaders that are working very hard, African leaders that are doing their best to combat this thing, their voices, anytime I saw how they poo-pooed the Madagascar medicine in Western media. Even one of the British newspaper was honest to say the only reason why we are poo-pooing the Madagascar effort is because it's an African effort, which will negate they are more expensive, they are more elaborate and scientific, big words, double blind and all of those things that will not sit well with their people. And at least one of their newspaper was honest enough to say that. So I'm saying all this, that we cannot just look at the great strides that are happening in Africa on COVID without understanding the global implications, the global thing that are going on. And I'll leave it at that, you know. And
Okay,
I can say,
yeah.
Mhm.
No, you were saying?
Yeah. I can say that up to this day in the United States, less than 1% of the 332 million Americans have been affected by COVID-19. 99 point some percent of us have not been affected. Now, I'm not trying to belittle anything,
Well,
but
that's the US.
in statistically, in my mathematical model, that is not something. Why are we always talking about when one person dies, it's one person too many? But when 99 people out of 100 survive, we don't say 99% too many survived. Even our lingo, even our perception in the mind is a little bit troubling. But like you said,
Well, I think in the African context, we definitely have a lot to talk about, and probably this could be the theme of one of the webinars that follow, the COVID-19 experience, the African experience with respect to COVID-19, whereby we can talk about all the various positive cures and also the constraints, and sort of have an overview. So I don't know if your book will be out by then, but definitely we hope that you would be helpful in terms of that particular initiative.
But and the book is, the contributors are across the globe, because I put the call out on Facebook, on LinkedIn and all that. So it's an international, but we have a lot of Africans that are writing chapters, Caribbean scholars that are writing chapters, people in the Americas and Europe, across the world. So it's
when
really,
is the projected date of publication?
The projected date, 9 months from now, we should be able to have the book out, because we have already done most of the work anyway. And many of the chapters have already been flowing in. It could be before that, you know, because of the excitement and the findings people are finding, and that we allow. The reason why I wanted it 9 months, so that way we can also have a postscript. Now, this is where we started. Now, look what happened since this thing was so highly discussed, you know.
Okay, well, we have given us quite a lot to walk away with. We look forward to that publication. And
we say Viva Castro, Viva Castro, Viva. You know, they are defeated virus, and they are going all over the world saving people from coronavirus. And for the first time in Italy, where they used to throw bananas on blacks playing soccer, they stand up and salute and cheer Black Cuban doctors coming to Italy to save their lives. Now, this is the power of the African. If only our leaders have the common sense to provide those things that are necessary for our people to survive, for our people to live good lives, the blessings will be tremendous. And Cuba has showed that not only to us Africa and the Pan-African world, but across the globe. Go to China and save them. Go to Italy and save them. Go to Spain and save them. And now they are being called all over the world to save them, to the point that we are telling certain countries, if you bring the Cubans to save, we're not going to have to deal, we're not going to have to do business with you. Now, this was the dream that Fidel had, and this is the African dream that the Cuban people have. And so I say, Viva Cuba, Viva Fidel, Viva Pan-Africanismo, as they say in Cuba.
I endorse this, I agree with you, and I repeat the same thing. Thank you so much. Okay, then, well, thank you very much for a wonderful discussion.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.